Hello and welcome to the Prime Sports Network. I am CJ Radune. I am here solo for the first time as we kick off Formula One coverage here on the Prime Sports Network. Excited to be doing this. Going to be flying solo, like I said, for the first time without Greg and Eric as we introduce the Formula One coverage to the network. Really excited about this because Formula One is, I think, if you've paid attention to the channel long enough and you've paid attention to our NASCAR coverage, you've recognized that Formula One really is where my heart is. So I'm excited for the 2023 season. But the best way to get ready for the 2023 season is to take a look at what happened last year in 2022. Formula One 2022, I think we all know, was exciting from a rules change perspective. We got an entire new car, but unfortunately, the prospects of that competitiveness with the brand new car kind of faded pretty quickly in the season because we had Red Bull and Max Verstappen just go on and completely dominate the entire season. It was a runaway, which was really, really disappointing considering 2021 had such a close battle between Verstappen and Hamilton going in even to the final race of the year, where it literally came down to the final restart of the season where Max Verstappen actually came over and overtook Hamilton for the championship. So in 2022, you'll remember Ferrari started off very strong. Charles Leclerc came out and won Bahrain, and there were big questions about Red Bull at the beginning of the season because they had a couple of retirements. It didn't look like they had all their stuff in the right order at the beginning of the season. Charles Leclerc with Ferrari actually won 2 of the first 3 races. As that season went on, though, Red Bull figured out what their problems were, made the fixes that they needed to, and then once we hit Imola around the April timeframe, it was all Max Verstappen and Red Bull racing. If you look at the last half of the year, in fact, there are only 2 drivers that won races in the last half of the 2022 season besides Max Verstappen. That was Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc's teammate at Ferrari, and George Russell. Interesting name there from Mercedes as things picked up toward the end of the year. Those who were paying attention know that Red Bull dominated and Max Verstappen was the one that ran away from it. Ferrari faded. And in fact, after the season, the reason why Ferrari faded, the team came out and said, hey, Red Bull was so far ahead of us, we actually stopped developing our car with at least 7 races left to go in the season. So they just gave up in order to focus on this 2023 championship. So that sets up questions for 2023. Max Verstappen, obviously, Red Bull continued on their winning ways and just walked away with the points. But Mercedes actually was the team that really came on strong at the end of the year. They worked so hard, as they always do, at car development. They were not where they needed to be at the beginning of the year, but they figured it out. They found a way to come back, and it wasn't Lewis Hamilton that ended up getting the victory lane. The only Mercedes win in 2022 came from his teammate, George Russell. So it'll be very interesting as we head into 2023 to see where exactly Mercedes is on this journey with this car, how Red Bull come out of the gate, and then what is going to happen with all the changes at Ferrari after another failure, quite honestly, to live up to Ferrari's expectations. They've got a whole host of management changes, strategy changes at the team, but did the gamble that they took last year in stopping developing their 2022 Challenger car, did that gamble pay off for 2023? Are they going to be more ready this year? We're going to find out this weekend, and actually we've already started to find out with testing at Bahrain. We got 2 days under our belts in terms of testing as we get ready for the kickoff of the 2023 season. Looking ahead to the 2023 season, we got a couple of changes. So we've got some big names that have left the sport. Actually, just one big name, I should say. Sebastian Vettel, multiple-time champion, one of the best all-time, retired. He hung up his helmet. He's done driving. As part of that, another big name, former champion, is actually sliding over into his seat at Aston Martin. That is Fernando Alonso. That is a really interesting move to pay attention to because if you know anything about the 2022 season, Alpine in that mid-pack battle, Alpine was actually pretty good, and Fernando Alonso was making some pretty good headway on that. So he saw something he likes in Aston Martin. He's going to team up with Lance Stroll and really help develop that car. It's going to be interesting to see how that relationship plays out because, as we all know, Fernando Alonso is a fierce competitor. Lance Stroll, he's probably got some growing to do. It's going to be interesting to see how far he's able to up his game, having another world champion in the likes of Fernando Alonso teaming up alongside of him. Looking at testing very early as well, Fernando Alonso is right on pace, and with Aston Martin, we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but it's looking like the switch is going to pay off for Fernando Alonso. As far as rule changes go, really just a bunch of tweaks that are out there. So nothing hugely major to be paying attention to. The schedule's a lot longer in 2023 than it has been in the past. So this is going to be the longest Formula One season in history. So a lot of opportunity to continue developing those cars. I think probably the biggest thing to pay attention to from a rules standpoint is really going to be around the ability of the teams to focus in on the new minimum weight. So the downforce with the cars, porpoising last year, that's another area where the rule changes have tried to make an impact to the 2023 cars. But I think this weight issue is going to be probably bigger than the difference in the ride height to address the porpoising. So weight has actually decreased the minimum weight has decreased an additional 2 kilograms. So teams worked really, really hard on their 2022 cars to get as close to that minimum weight limit as possible, and that's without fuel. This year, they're going to have to work even harder. So where are those savings going to come from? The engineers and the aerodynamicists have got their work cut out for them. What pieces can they make lighter but still retain the strength, and what pieces can they actually take off of the cars in order to get closer to that minimum weight? I mentioned porpoising. The new ground effects on the 2022 cars caused people like Mercedes or teams like Mercedes and Ferrari to really struggle with the car bouncing off of the track throughout the year in 2022. And that's a big reason why Red Bull actually found a lot of success. So the minimum ride height has actually increased, and we're thinking now that porpoising is actually gone. So with that problem gone, does that help the Ferrari? Does that help the Mercedes even more? Does that bring them closer to Red Bull? Or does Red Bull continue to have their advantage because they had it figured out before already in 2022? They didn't deal with those same types of problems. But again, just relatively small tweaks to the overall rules package. I think we're going to see a continuation of what we saw in 2022 in terms of car development, which really sets up the stage for testing for 2023 here. The other changes in 2023 are certainly going to be the rookie class. So everybody's going to have their eyes on the new drivers. Who's going to be the best of those new drivers? We've got Oscar Piastri going to McLaren. We've got Nick de Vries going to AlphaTauri. And we have Logan Sargent at Williams. And Logan Sargent is actually the American. So I know that the audience here in particular is going to have a lot of interest in Logan Sargent. And they're going to be really interested in particular to see how he settles in at Williams and how he's able to improve that team. They were not good in 2022. Logan had some time in the car. I think it was even at Austin. So he got a hometown showing on a Friday practice session, and he made his case to be able to get that race seat. And so he's got a lot of opportunity ahead of him. Unfortunately, it's not with one of the top teams, but can Williams make some progress in 2023 to help move him a little bit further up the grid? And he's going to be the American superstar. Of the three rookies, though, I got to say Nick de Vries is the one everyone's going to want to pay attention to. I think he's got the most potential. He's established. He did a race in Formula One before, and he's going into one of the most coveted seats. AlphaTauri has a history of performing really well at the front of that mid-pack or toward the top of that mid-pack battle. They also have a direct line into Red Bull. They're under the Red Bull umbrella, and they have a habit of promoting their drivers to that senior team when they show the potential. So the guy that's got the most to gain probably in all of this, I would say, is Nick de Vries. And I think he's going to come out of the gate swinging. He's well established, very, very capable, and I think he's going to be fast in 2023. So as far as the 2023 Rookie of the Year prediction, my money's on Nick de Vries today. As we look into 2023 testing, Red Bull and Verstappen come out of the gate looking strong. We've got 2 days of testing here at Bahrain, the week before the Bahrain Grand Prix. This is the only time on track preseason that these cars are going to have to be able to go at it in anger and for teams to sort out the problems, see where their weaknesses are, understand what their strengths are, and really get ready for next week's kickoff to the season. Day one had Max Verstappen on top, and the thing that's most interesting about that is that he did 157 laps on day one all by himself. And that top time came on medium or harder tires. In the afternoon, those teams that or teams started switching over to soft tires, which are going to give them faster lap times. No one was able to beat the morning time from Max Verstappen. He ended the day 157 laps, which talks about Red Bull's reliability, and on top. So they're fast and they're reliable right out of the gate here in Bahrain. Who was second in that testing? None other than Fernando Alonso in the new Aston Martin. So he did his lap on soft tires. He was less than a tenth of a second behind Max Verstappen. So we know Aston Martin has got some raw speed right out of the gate. The question is, how are they going to be able to develop that car? Are they going to be able to maintain that speed throughout the entire season, maybe even an entire race? And what's that reliability look like? In terms of problems, there are definitely some problems that are out there. I think McLaren is the one that is probably waving the white flag at this point. It's rare, really rare in testing before the season starts for a team to admit that they've got problems. McLaren did just that. They said they are not where they want to be in terms of their targets for their new car. So they have a ton of work ahead of them. Question remains, how fast are they compared to everybody else? But I get a feeling that they're going to be toward the back of that mid-pack battle. So who have I not talked about? Ferrari and Mercedes. Ferrari, also very stout, very fast. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc on day one were 3 and 4 on the timesheets, and they got a combined 140-ish laps in, which tells me that Ferrari is not only fast, but it's also reliable. And then looking at here at day 2, which actually just wrapped up a couple of hours ago, we got Max Verstappen again, second on the timesheet, less than a tenth second behind Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo. Again, Zhou put on the soft tires and was able to get a quick lap at the end of the day, but Zhou did 132 laps and was able to top the timesheet. So great for Alfa Romeo, some good changes there. Red Bull Racing, Max Verstappen, very consistent. And then guess who is number 3 on that time chart today? Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. So again, we got some really good battles shaping up, and I think that testing indicates that Red Bull is where they need to be. I think Ferrari is coming on strong. They got some question marks in my mind, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think Aston Martin may end up being the team to watch with some single lap pace. We might see some front row starts from them if they're able to keep that up this year in 2023. Looking ahead to the 2023 season, it kicks off next week at Bahrain. After these 4 days of testing, the teams really go in anger for 2023. Obviously, with where we are, Max Verstappen, Red Bull, they are the odds-on favorite, no question. From the day that the season ended in 2022 and that checkered flag fell, if you looked at the futures, Max Verstappen and Red Bull were at the top. The question was who is behind him, really. He still remains the favorite. I just checked this morning. Still a heavy favorite, which is interesting. But interestingly enough, guess who's second? Lewis Hamilton. And that's for the reason that I talked about earlier in the way that Mercedes closed the 2022 season. Last year was the first in a long time Lewis Hamilton wasn't able to get to victory lane. He didn't win a single race, but he's a multiple times world champion, one of the best drivers on the grid, failed to win a race. Mercedes, however, they worked their butts off on that car, and that car caught up to both Red Bull and Ferrari and actually challenged Ferrari for second place in the Constructors' Championship at the end of 2022. So I think they finally figured out what they need to do to get the best out of this car. I think the ride height changes with their porpoising issues are going to help them early in 2023. And we all know Mercedes is probably the best at mind games. So when you're looking at the testing times for the week before this race actually kicks off, take Mercedes with a little bit of grain of salt. If they're out there doing hundreds of laps, which they are, I wouldn't worry too much about them. I think they're going to have the pace, and I think that's going to show once we get to practice and qualifying once the green flag goes. As far as the full season goes, I still think you got to look at Verstappen. So it's probably going to be, from my perspective, a Verstappen versus Mercedes kind of season. The wild card in there is Ferrari. So Ferrari started the 2022 season extremely quickly. And in fact, they were so fast that despite the stopping of developing their car almost halfway through the season, they were still able to get front row starts and poles. That speed was undeniable. What they need to do is figure out how to manage that through an entire race. They had some problems with tires. They had some problems with strategy. Tires are changing this year. So the understeer that Ferrari dealt with the temperatures in 2022, that kind of goes away from them now, supposedly with these new Pirelli tires. Similarly, they got new management. So what changes on the strategy booth are Ferrari going to have? Is it going to help them? Is it going to improve them? Are they actually going to be able to take advantage of the inherent speed that this car has? So I think if you're looking for a lock for 2023 early, probably want to look at Red Bull and Max Verstappen, though I do think Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes are going to give them a really good run for the money. But your dark horse may just be Ferrari. And if you're going to bet on a Ferrari, I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. He consistently outpaces Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz has said he's fast. Carlos Sainz is fast. But Sainz even admitted in 2022 he wasn't ready mentally to be able to battle for that championship. So I still think Charles Leclerc has got the edge. So my 2023, at the top of my list, preseason here, 2 days of testing in. I'm going to rank them Verstappen, Hamilton, and Leclerc. So we'll see how that pans out the rest of the year. But really looking forward to on-track action coming this week at Bahrain. It's going to be a fantastic start to the season, the longest Formula One season in history, and hopefully it's a competitive one. Thanks for joining us in our first Formula One Outlook here on the Prime Sports Network. I am CJ Radune. Be sure to check out our Formula One coverage on rotowire.com. If you have any questions, want to hear anything in particular, or look for comments on any particular subject related to Formula One, feel free to drop them in the comments section. Send them along. We'd be happy to address them in the future. Thanks, and here's to a good 2023.